Jamie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to see some of you for my morning session. And I'm really excited about this. I'm not even going to call it a presentation. I'm going to call it a discussion because I'm really relying on you guys to be part of the conversation. This is intended to be, I'm going to share some strategies and I'm going to share some data and all of that fun stuff. But I really want to hear from you guys because I think this is an issue that is best addressed when we all come together, and it also helps that this is a somewhat local event, although I know we have people from all over the country, but sometimes we're talking about networks and broadband, it does help to kind of know locally what's available and what people are doing. So please be ready to participate today. Okay, so my name is Rachel Riggs. I am an ESL teacher. That's how I identify myself. My current position is as an instructional specialist, but that was a recent transition. And so I still feel very much like a teacher, and I feel very connected to the classroom. So I work at Frederick Community College in Frederick, Maryland, and I have focused a lot of my energy on educational technology implementation and on digital literacy integration. I developed the digital literacy action plan, and I helped Jamie a little bit with the Maryland Department of Labor digital literacy framework instructor implementation guide, which was amazing. And so I have been kind of in this digital literacy bubble for a while. And the reason I wanted to do this today at the BTI was to kind of dive deeper into digital inclusion as a whole and some of the other elements of it. So I'm excited to be with you, and I hope you're ready to share. So what we're going to do is we're going to define digital inclusion and look at what are all of the elements that are included when we talk about digital inclusion, what are all of the things that we need to consider. And then we're going to have time to share some strategies. So like I said, I have a little bit to start that conversation, but I'm relying on you guys to also share what you are doing to address these different elements of digital inclusion. And then of course, we will have some time for Q&A. Hold on one second. There we go. So what is digital inclusion? This definition was taken from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. If you're not familiar, I would encourage you to go over to their website. I'm going to be sharing a lot of resources of theirs today, but they're just a really great starting place for digital inclusion. Digital inclusion refers to the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. That's from their Digital Inclusion Startup Manual, which is also a great resource. So there are 3, and I put 3 to 5 elements of digital inclusion because there are some areas where you will see digital inclusion described as there being like a 3-legged stool of digital inclusion. And then in other places, you'll see these 2 additional elements added. And so the 3 to 5 elements, depending on who you're talking with, are first of all, connection. So when we talk about connection, we're talking about internet access, broadband, Wi-Fi, or even cellular data. Cellular, is that a word? Yes, cellular data. It's sounding weird to me right now, but yes. And then devices, and when we talk about devices, we're talking about the actual hardware. So desktop computers, laptop computers, tablets, or smartphones. Skills, the skills I'm not going to list because there are many and they're defined differently depending on where you look, but those are obviously the digital skills needed in order to be a digital citizen. And so those range from the foundational skills of being able to use a computer mouse to more complicated skills like being able to create and manipulate a spreadsheet to organize data. And then these 2 kind of extra elements, which at times I see them interacting a lot with the 3 elements. That's kind of why I call them extra. But The first extra element is tech support. And so when we talk about tech support and digital inclusion, we're asking ourselves, first of all, do the adults who are using the devices and the connection and the skills have access to someone who can support them and who they can ask questions to? But also, do they have the skills that they need in order to pursue tech support? And so that's another area of tech support, is not just, is it available, but is it accessible to everyone? And then instruction and development. And so this is an area where we're talking about, is there enough content out there for adult learners to develop their digital skills and to learn new skills? So those are the 3 to 5 elements. We're going to focus mostly on the 3 elements, but I wanted to point out those other 2 because they are important to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about strategies for digital inclusion. Do we have a way to provide tech support? Do we have a way to create or to be more intentional or strategic about the instruction that we provide, and how we help learners continue to develop their skills? And you know, I keep clicking, you guys. I'm running my PowerPoint from Mentimeter for the first time today, and you have to press the arrow buttons. And so if I keep clicking and nothing changes, that's why. Okay, so I wanted to present, because I think it's very important to look at who these areas impact the most and to look at the data. So this is taken from the US Census Bureau. And this graph shows us how race impacts connection. So we're just talking about connection here. And so if you look at the first dark blue area, that's no connectivity. And so you can see in order, right, that Black and Hispanics are most impacted by a lack of connectivity to the internet. And again, I clicked, you know what? Stop doing that. And then next we have income. And so here we can see in this graph that the lower the income, the increase in a lack of connectivity. And then educational attainment, and we see the same thing. The lower the level of education, the lower the access to internet connection. And so we're going to see these patterns repeated across all 3 of these key elements of digital inclusion. So if we go over to, oh, I'm sorry, there was a poll there. Skipped right over it. Okay, so if you guys, I want to hear from you before I go over to devices and we talk about how those impact access to devices. I want to hear how you have seen connection barriers affect learning in your program. So what have you seen in terms of your students, or maybe just, if you're not a teacher, just the people in your program, how have these connectivity issues impacted them, especially over the last year? So Jamie put the link in the chat. It's just menti.com, and you enter this code 41433127. And you can just type out your answer. Now, you can use the chat just as effectively. So if you want to put your answers in the chat, that's perfectly fine too. Okay, Edmund says frustration. Okay, yes. Frustrating to not have the internet access that you need. And I think that we have become even better in touch with this over the last year, because everyone needs a good connection to be able to be on Zoom or on Google Meet and doing live classes like that. Okay, and then dropouts, obvious. Yeah, so running out of data when using cell phone or hotspot on cell phone. Judy is saying it's a roadblock. So it's like, it's stopping everything. Inability to continue. Percentage of students are not able to participate. Students who can't hear can't be heard in Zoom class. Okay, so sometimes even it's like if they can connect, there's still the additional issues of being able to participate and being able to engage. No internet, not the proper technology to participate in classes. Right, students wanting to come to class and cannot attend. Yes, huge barrier. Connection freezes, I'm getting in the chat box. Yes, low-income families found it unaffordable to purchase high-speed Wi-Fi. Charlotte says they had to completely close ESL classes because they knew that students did not have adequate access. Yeah, and so basically, you know, it's a complete barrier unless we are able to provide some strategies and solutions to help bridge that gap. Yeah, you guys are all participating on Mentimeter too, multiple people. Yeah, and then yes, we ran into that issue too. So it wasn't just like, do they have internet access or not? It's how many people in their house are on the internet at the same time that we're running classes. And someone put on Mentimeter that the children's learning had to be prioritized. And so many times adult learners were the ones making that sacrifice so that children had a good connection. Okay, and then Susan brought up the issue even of testing. So it's not just access to instruction, right? It's really the whole scope. It's being able to get into an orientation, right? And so that's that entry point. And then being able to access the learning and participate in a class. And then being able to test and go to the next level. So all of it is enormously impacted just by whether or not the student has a connection. Did not have hotspots, took time to go to school to get hotspots. I think we're saying broken devices, noisy environment. Yes. Okay, yeah, so we have all seen how connectivity impacts our programs and our students. Yeah, and we're gonna talk a lot about devices in a minute too. And so that's gonna bring me actually to my next slide. And this is the data on devices. And this is taken from the Pew Research Center, and it's about smartphone dependency. This is just one data point, and it may seem limited, but when you think about how these factors impact our learners, it actually is quite exaggerated. So when we look at smartphone dependency by race, Hispanic and Black people are most dependent on smartphones for internet access and thus for learning. And then if we look at income, it's similar to what we saw in the connection, right? The lower the income, the more dependent on smartphones. And finally, education. So in adult education, we know that most of our students have less than a high school diploma, and that is what puts them at the most dependent on smartphones in terms of that data. So that's 23% of adults with less than a high school education are dependent on smartphones. So like I said, if we look at race, income, and education separately, we might think, oh, these are small percentages. But when we look at how all of these factors come together and what's represented amongst our adult learners, we see that a lot of them are smartphone dependent. And I think this was another big lesson that everyone learned during the pandemic when they saw that students were joining class with bad internet connection, but also just on their smartphones because they didn't have another device to use. So I want to know some tangible ways. How did you see that play out in the classroom or in your program? What effect did it have? The fact that your learners may not have had desktop or laptop computers, and some were probably limited to smartphones. How did you see that take place? How did you see that affect learners over the last year? And it's the same, same thing, guys. Same code, I believe it should be. Yeah, same code as the last one. So you can go back in, or you can go into the chat box. It's fine too. It's the same idea. Okay, Zoom chat. Yeah, so the Zoom chat is hard to get into with the phone. Inability to effectively use some functions. So if we're talking about annotation, we have students in a class on a computer who can annotate on the screen using text and a variety of tools. If you're on a cell phone, you can only draw when you're annotating. So if you're trying to write a word, that becomes very difficult. Thank you, Edmund. And then some don't know how to properly use their devices. So that will fall into skills, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And okay, so then on Mentimeter, I'm seeing that enrollment went down, not able to participate as easily on a phone. Yes, very frustrating. Small screen, no mouse, no separate keyboard. You can imagine how frustrating it may be. Drop out. Okay, the content they tried to read on their phones may have been too small. Different devices require different tech support, which isn't scalable for instructors. Interesting point, and we'll talk about that and share resources for that too. And then we have in the chat box, more students use phones and our phones are unable to use phone effectively. Okay, so Maxine, I think you're saying that they know how to use their phones well, and that's definitely true. And if we can even leverage their comfort with a mobile phone, there's a strategy. Yeah, Megan, good point. It's harder to navigate from Zoom or a video conferencing platform on your phone into like a website to do a quick activity or into Kahoot or something like that. It's hard when you're doing everything on one device. Having to pause or read, yeah, Leah, it can get bogged down quicker, text pings. Yeah, troubleshooting is more difficult when you have students on a variety of devices. So it's not like when we used to be in a computer lab and we knew that everybody was working on the same operating system, everybody was working on the same kind of computer, and so we could just troubleshoot based off of that single device. Now, we need to know, what does it look like on an Android? What does it look like on an Apple phone? What does it look like on a Pixel? What does it look like in Google Chrome? What does it look like in Safari? What does it look like in Microsoft Edge? It's like, you gotta know it all, or at least be prepared for all of it. That's difficult. Judy says phone calls coming in during instructional use, lots of echo when other people are in the same area. iPads are hard to use for Zoom. Yes, yep. And so, yeah, when we look at this, right, we see students they cannot access every kind of device, right? And so it makes it much more challenging for them to get into class, to participate in class, and to be successful. And so we have to develop strategies that are directly impacting or positively impacting the fact that they may have limited devices and they may only be able to work on a smartphone. And so I'm excited to hear what some of you did in response to some of these barriers. But that'll be in a moment. Let's go over to skills now. So this is that third element. So we talked about the first one is connection, second one is devices, and now we're looking at skills. And so just like we see that amongst our learners, it's hard for them to access a reliable network or broadband. It's hard for them sometimes to have multiple devices or the right device for our class. And then also a lot of them may not have the skills that are necessary to participate in learning when it's online or blended or what is it called? Remote, right? This is from the Department of Education. Now this is from 2012, but we can only imagine how the years have impacted these numbers. And these are digital literacy rates. And so when we look at digital literacy rate by educational attainment, we see the same patterns, that students with less than a high school diploma tend to not be digitally literate or to be most impacted by those digital skills gaps. And then also, I know we have a lot of ESL instructors here, so you may find this nativity status graph interesting, that students who are foreign-born tend to be to have less digital literacy than native-born students. Okay. So similar to our other questions, I'd like to know how you guys saw this play out in your programs. Now here we're just talking about skills. And so when we talk about digital literacy, I probably should have defined that, but we're talking about the skills that are necessary to participate in instruction, not like internet connection or what devices you have, but actually how well can you use the technology that is at your disposal. Can you navigate a mouse? Can you create an email account? Can you set a safe password? Can you join a Zoom room and open the chat box? Can you turn in an assignment in Google Classroom? Can you, let's see, how do we get even further on that? Can you create a PowerPoint presentation? Can you collaborate on a document, right? So we have lots of different skills that we use. And so even if we have a good connection and we have the right devices, if we don't have the skills, what happens? You guys have seen it happen. So tell me what that looks like in your classrooms. Okay, Edmund says a lack of confidence. Yes. And I like, Edmund, that you're always coming from that socio-emotional perspective. It's frustrating. We have a lack of confidence, and it's important to consider how these things impact a learner's emotions and mental health. So I appreciate you bringing in that perspective. I found, yes, Susan, absolutely. I am not saying at all that this is across the board. In fact, we see a lot of times, I've had many ESOL students who are far more advanced than I am digitally. So I am in no way saying that this is blanket to everyone, but that is the data that perhaps some of our immigrant students struggle more with digital skills. And so we do have to consider that, right? That we have many who are quite advanced, who are graphic designers, who are, you know, much better with technology. And we have some who grew up in areas where they don't have any devices or any connection. And so they may not have developed those skills. Thank you for bringing that up, though. I totally agree. Okay, so Megan, yeah, so you have to, good, you're getting into the strategy. So I want you to remember that strategy you just shared and share it again when we are all sharing strategies. But yes, so you spent the first 3 days of class practicing the mute and unmute, right? And so that's something that if we come into class without that digital skill, it can be very challenging. Yeah, Leah, good point. Sometimes the skills depend on the device. And so we have students who are very capable on their phones, but maybe when they sit at a desktop computer, their skills are looking different. Absolutely. Great. So good. Kristen, you also shared a strategy that I want you to share again when we're sharing strategies, but that's excellent. So you put it into your intake process before placing them. You started incorporating basic digital literacy. That's great strategy. Frustration when moving from Zoom. Yeah, again, yeah. So, okay, I'm going over to Mentimeter to read some of your responses. Lower level learners need more technical assistance. We have probably seen that pattern emerge, right? That that is true. Okay. Difficulty teaching your less, coming across roadblocks and having to change plans. Okay. We don't know who we are missing for basic technology. Yes. Oh, that's a good one. We don't know who we're missing for basic technology education, because how do you train for in digital literacy in a digital environment, right? That was a huge challenge. We don't know what the skills are all the time because we're in a digital environment. And so if we can't get a student into Zoom or something, then we don't know if they're just not coming or if they didn't have the skills to come in. Good thought there. Yeah, so we lose a lot of time in class focusing on these digital skills, and students do get frustrated. And yeah, lots of waiting on other students to finish something. Okay, I'm going back over to the Zoom chat. We have students must be at least semi-literate in any language to use a smartphone. So surely some very low literacy students are excluded entirely. Good point, Megan. Great. Nathan, that's a strategy. Wait on the strategies. We're focusing on the negative right now. Don't be positive. Just kidding. No, but that's a great strategy. I want you to share that when we get over those strategies. But this is good. You know, I don't mean to focus on the negative. What I mean to do is focus on the challenges. We cannot identify or develop solutions until we know what are the challenges, what are we actually seeing. And so that's why I wanted everybody to share, what are you seeing? What are the challenges here? Age is a huge factor. Yes, age is a factor. We can see many of these overlapping demographics, right? And how it impacts digital skills, digital inclusion, connectivity, access, and the skills. I think age is a bigger factor. We have young students who, yeah, they're growing up in a digitally rich, technology rich environment. And so they are more comfortable. Great, you guys. Well, I can't wait to hear all your strategies. So we're going to go through some strategies now and talk about that. And this is, you know, it's been a great conversation so far. We've been talking about some of the barriers, which, like I said, is important. It's important to know and to be aware. And now we can talk about, okay, how did you address that? Now that I know what you all were seeing, I want to know, what did you do in response? And before I get even into the strategies, I want to emphasize that we all take part in this. We can advocate, we can try to influence policymakers, we can try to influence broadband providers and all of that. And I hope we are, and we should. But we also have certain things that we can do at whatever level we are to improve or to make things more accessible. And so I want you to think definitely about advocacy, but also about, what can I do in my everyday practice? What's something that I can change or tweak to have a positive impact? Okay, so first we're going to talk about strategies for access. So we've broken this down, right? We looked at the challenges in terms of access to the internet, to a reliable connection. And now we're going to talk about, what are some strategies? So how can we meet the needs there, and how can we bridge the gap? The number one thing I think we need to remember in this area is to know the landscape. And so you see what I have there is an image from broadbandnow.com/Maryland. I'll put that in the chat box. But it's a website that breaks down, and it's for every state. So if you're here from Virginia, you can look at it from Virginia. If you're here from California, it's for every state. And it breaks down the digital divide and the access issues in every state. So know the landscape, right? We have to know what is accessible in our area, because these network issues are impacted based off of what area you live in. So know the landscape, and that includes hotspots. What hotspots are available? And community networking. Where is there open access to Wi-Fi? So if I have a student who needs access to Wi-Fi during class, is there a place that they can go and they can participate in class while they're sitting there and using the Wi-Fi? Or maybe they just need to study. Is there a place that they can go just to use the Wi-Fi to finish their homework? And am I able to direct them to those various places in the community? So knowing hotspots, knowing the community organizations that are providing access, even becoming one of those organizations. So think about, do we have a space on our campus or in our building that we could reserve for people just to access the internet? Nothing more, nothing less. We're not putting them in a class. We're not putting them in a class. I don't have any other ideas to say, but just thinking about, is there a space that we have that we could just give access? Because sometimes that is the number one barrier. And then there's also, I wanted to point you guys toward the Discount Internet Guidebook. This is something that was published by NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and it is geared toward practitioners and toward like broadband network companies to give them ideas for what they could do to address digital inclusion. So it's definitely worth maybe not reading the whole thing, but identifying those chapters or pieces that apply to you and could give you some good advice. So there's the Discount Internet Guidebook that I would recommend as a resource. And it helps you, it'll tell you the eligibility and the restrictions for various programs. And so like sometimes we'll see AT&T come out with an ad, low cost Wi-Fi. And then when we look further, we realize that it excludes some of our learners for whatever reason. So it's important to kind of know how to navigate those different opportunities and how to communicate with students about them. So I do recommend the guidebook. Now, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go to the next slide, and these are some of my strategies and one resource that I recommend, and I wanna hear from you guys. What have you done? How did you address access barriers? Did you open up a room for students? Did you, was there something, some organization, some company that you referred them to help them get internet access? Was there some recommendation? Okay, good. So Viviana says, we lent students laptops and hotspots as needed. Okay, so lending programs, that was a pretty common solution. Good one. Any other strategies or resources that you use to address access barriers? Okay, good, Maxine. I want you to share that again when we get to the skills section, definitely. So right now I'm just talking about if there was anything you did, if someone in your class didn't have internet, how did you communicate with them? How did you deliver content to them? How did you reach out to them? How did you assess them? All of these issues, like what did you do with students who could not connect to the internet? Okay, so we've got one. We provided resources from the community who were offering free internet services, etc. That's great. And so now my follow-up question is, how did you vet those resources and how did you communicate those resources? So I want to know, was there anything that you wouldn't include because of certain restrictions? And was there any certain way that you had to communicate those to students to help them know what was preferable or anything like that? I'd be interested. Okay. Good. So Beth mentions using WhatsApp. This was a big shift we saw during the pandemic, was the shift to text messaging tools rather than email communication or other forms of communication. So Beth used WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp, Beth, I'm curious, did you use it for just communication or did you also use it for class, for instruction and learning? And then she also provided hotspots. Great. Okay, so it looks like we have some networking here, community networking. Our local employment department was able to give quite a few students internet access and or increased broadband. Awesome. Okay, we refer students to the libraries. Good. And so that's about knowing the landscape, what is available. So as instructors, that's something that we can take on. And we can be responsible for. Do I know what's available in my immediate local community to share with students? Great. Some programs use Remind and WhatsApp. Excellent, yeah. So we saw not just using WhatsApp for reaching out to students, but even some people were delivering the content via WhatsApp. They were texting activities. I held classes for my family literacy program over WhatsApp. Using the video, and then also like we would do 30 minutes on video of English practice, and I would present the concepts, and then we would practice over text. I would send them pictures and they would write sentences. So we saw a lot of that, not just using it to text, but also using it to teach and to learn. Okay, Remind app for text communication. No great advantage over email. Okay, so Susan, even students who don't, I guess what I'm getting from yours is that students, even if they didn't have access, they could still probably access email on their phones. And so the text messaging was not as important. Okay, great. WhatsApp for communication and exchange of lessons, completed work. Great. And then Marcida, I hope I pronounced that correctly. She used Facebook Messenger. Facebook is another great one because it's something that students have already usually, and they've already used it in many cases. Remind in Google Voice. Oh, wow. Cool, Kristen. They offered phone-only instruction. That is cool, and mailed hard copies. Two great approaches. Yeah. Okay, and then I'm going back to Mentimeter. I see someone from the library who's in charge of hotspots. They're adding 200 hotspots, partnering with the 311 call center to get discounted internet. Amazing. Those community connections, that networking is so important. A monthly newsletter, good idea, that gets sent out to the enrolled students. So curious, whoever put the monthly newsletter, was it a print newsletter that you mail out to all the students, and did you include information about where they could access the internet? Curious to know about that. Okay, and then I've also seen this, and it's something that we're considering in our program, adding an orientation that includes referral to internet access. Curious, whoever put the orientation one, in your orientation, do you guys also orient them to some of the tools that you're using, the digital tools, or is it mostly just to refer them to networks, to connection? Okay, and then also include a question regarding their access and intake process. Contact them to refer to county and federal programs. Awesome, great. We provided limited space on site for individuals to access broadband. Great. Some were given a laptop. That's awesome. Great. This is cool. This is giving me a lot of ideas. I hope that this is giving you guys ideas too. That's really the intention, is to have a conversation where we can all get ideas from each other. Love the monthly newsletter. Okay, so you did in the orientation include Zoom training. Yeah. Okay, yeah, Susan says, I wish we had an orientation because it takes time. It takes a lot of time to onboard students to those new tools. And then, right, some of them are not, are familiar with the tools. And so then you're essentially, just using up their time. So yeah, considering that, maybe an orientation or an intake process that includes onboarding to Google Classroom, Zoom, Google Meet, Blackboard, whatever it is that you're using, so that students can learn it and get practice with it. But if they're already fine with it, they don't have to attend. So I think that's a great strategy. Okay, Danielle says that the newsletter was sent electronically and a lot of information about what's going on in the community. Great. Great. Anna says they made that required, that orientation. Wow, lots of great ideas, you guys. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I'm going to move over to, yes, Beth, good one. Video playlists. I've seen a lot of that too, using video playlists for getting them oriented to Zoom classes and some of the ed tech tools. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to move to strategies for devices. So we're moving away from just, do they have internet access or not? And we're talking now about, do they have instruction that they can access on whatever device they have? And so if they have limited access to devices, in other words, they don't have a desktop or a laptop or a tablet, they are only on their smartphone, what strategies do we use to meet the needs there? So we talked about the challenges. I'm excited to hear the strategies here because I know this was a big area in terms of discovery of, wow, a lot of students on smartphones. So a couple of strategies, again, knowing the landscape, the community network. There are tons of refurbishing and lending programs that exist. So tapping into that and knowing where they are. I would say contact, your program, contact some organizations like Maryland TESOL recently just did a big drive with a refurbishing company. So think about organizations like that could support you, but knowing what community organizations in your area are refurbishing computers and reselling them, or who are loaning computers, thinking about that. And then when it comes to smartphones, I always say it's really incumbent on the instructors to make the instruction accessible if they have students who are only on smartphones. Yes, advocate for sure. Tell people, you know, we should be lending laptops, we should be providing devices. Definitely advocate, but also think about your own instruction. What can I do to make this more mobile friendly? So adapt instruction. And I would say some things to think about there are your slides. How many sentences are you including on your slides? And imagine reading those on a smartphone, okay? Slide, like that whole setup of your slides, but also testing everything on a smartphone. Do you join your own class on a smartphone? Do you use the same tools that you're asking students to use as a student before you use them in class to see how they'll play out on your smartphone? Do you download the apps that they would have to download? So think through all of this, make sure you're testing it from that perspective. And then also surveying learners, just knowing who in your class is on what device. I have a Google form. Actually, I'm gonna write it on my list because I can share it with you guys. I have a Google form that asks students, are you using a computer or a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone? Oh, you're using a smartphone. Okay, are you using an Apple, an Android, Pixel, right? And so just knowing that information can be very helpful, because then when you're onboarding them or giving instruction, then you know, oh, you know what? I don't have anybody on an iPhone, so I don't need to include the screenshots from the iPhone. Let me write that down, so I'll add that to the final package. Share Google form for devices. Okay, so survey learners, and then, oh, I already mentioned this, my bad. So test it out on your smartphone. Don't ever ask, I would say don't ever ask students to do something unless you've already seen what the experience will be like on a smartphone. So I wanna hear from you guys now. I already see some strategies popping up, awesome. What strategies or resources have you used to address device barriers? Great. So Anna is saying in intake, they include that question about devices. That's a great idea. For my instructors, I share a form with them that they can use at the very start of class. So I think either way, but that's great if you can get it at intake and then share with instructors. Megan says include detailed screenshots / photos of physical hardware and physical instructions. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. So very detailed step-by-step instructions. And technical instructions. Okay, I think I understood you. I wasn't sure if we were delivering these physically, but no, that's great. Yes, so detailed screenshots, everything that they're gonna see. And you know, the beauty of developing those screenshots, well, it's not fun all the time, right? But it does take you through the process. So you know what they're gonna be seeing, what they have to click on when you're creating those screenshots. I would say with the screenshots, also create a sharing program amongst the instructors in your program where you guys can all put those into a shared folder. And then the next time that Joe Schmo wants to show them something in Quizlet, he can look in that folder and say, oh, look, somebody already took all the screenshots from Quizlet on an iPhone, so I can use those. Would encourage that kind of sharing amongst your teams. Yeah, connection with local agencies who provide devices. Yeah, and we talked about that a lot in the access portion, but yes, it would go here, right? What local agencies are refurbishing or lending devices. If you guys know of agencies, please just put their name in the Mentimeter. That's gonna be great. That's gonna be a good starting point for anybody in here who might want to connect with them. So if you know the names of local agencies, please drop them in. Okay, so Kristen asked, oh wow, that's actually a great question. Kristen's program asks if they have Wi-Fi or unlimited data in intake so that they know then, you know, what their connection is like and they don't use it all up. And like she said, they don't end up with a crazy bill. That's really important. I hadn't thought about that. Megan says rely more heavily on textbook than normal because it's something I know they all have and are able to access. Great. So yeah, a lot of programs are just still giving out physical textbooks. That's definitely an option. Use YouTube videos of tasks that are performed on the student. Yeah, yes, good one too. Tons of YouTube videos. Like you can just look up, how do I create a Google Slides presentation on an iPhone, right? And then usually you can find something and share it. And you can even find it in so many languages that can be helpful. Viviana says they made videos on how to use Canvas. Yeah, using Screencastify, tools like that, you can make those videos yourselves, but getting students to watch them is challenging. Yeah, true. Okay, after students complete testing and orientation, you invite them to attend an intro to computer class. Great, yes. Teaching those foundational skills so that they're prepared for their classes. Okay, we have someone who is not at all local from Oregon. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. My sister just moved to Oregon, so that's exciting. Your employment department had access to lots of funds to help students and no way to connect with individuals until I sent them our students. Yes, that's why it's so important, because you're right. Like a lot of these places are ready and willing and eager and have the resources. What they don't have is the people who are taking advantage of them. So if we as educators can connect our students with those resources, that's like huge. Refer students to Senior Planet Online Zoom training programs. Okay, I've never heard of that. So there's a resource there. Provide initial Zoom training in English and Spanish. Awesome. A Spanish speaking Zoom assistant in each class. Amazing, great idea. Great, I spent most of the weeks of class covering the skills necessary for basic participation and etiquette. Yes, okay, Megan, awesome. Yes, and so you spent a whole week on that, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's that repeated exposure. I mean, they're learning these skills just like they're learning new vocabulary, right? We need to chunk it, we need to repeat it. Thank you, Nathan, no problem. And great, good one, Megan. Emergency broadband benefit does not cover all costs but can help. Thank you for that specific resource that we can all go take a look at and share out. Okay, guys, I know we've only got 10 more minutes, so Jamie Harris is gonna kill me for rushing through the skills section, but that's okay. We can continue the conversation offline, of course. Digital Us Coalition, they published this Building a Digitally Resilient Workforce report. I recommend reading it. It's a great report. But part of that was thinking about how do we need to deliver digital skills content in classes. And I really like these 4 kind of principles for that. So first of all, integrated and applied. And so if you look at Jamie's digital literacy framework or the instructor implementation guide, that's all about integrating the skills into the content learning. So integrated and applied, infusing it into other programming and instruction. And then immediately relevant and current. And so when we are talking about Zoom skills, right, those were immediately relevant and current over the last year. We need to be thinking about what are students using in real life. So think about your public school system. If you have an adult learner, what tools are they using in your public school system that's going to help that parent help their children? That would be relevant. What sectors do they work in, and what tools or digital skills are necessary in that job industry, whatever you want to call it. So immediately relevant and current, designed and defined for use in multiple contexts. Again, that's like being relevant, but it's, how are we going to transfer it? So if I show them how to use Google Classroom in my class, are they using that in the public schools to where that's a transferable digital skill? And then similarly, if I show them how to use a PowerPoint, is that something that they could use at work? Those kinds of things. How can we build transferable skills into that? And then forward looking. So we need not just learners who know how to use certain tools and have certain skills, but who are also digitally resilient. And so who are going to keep up with the constantly changing landscape of technology and be able to acquire new skills, and who have applied critical thinking when it comes to acquiring digital skills. All very important. So I could go on and on about digital skills, ideas. So I need to not go on and on about it because we don't have that much time. But if you ever want to continue the conversation about how to teach digital skills, it's one that I'm always eager to have. Okay, so based on their needs, amazing. Yeah, Karen, good point. Yeah, we have to look at that fine print before we share out those opportunities because it'll change things. Peg says the relevancy of digital skills is important. Whereas use a phone or like it's a TV, just kind of on as background while they're doing something else. Yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm going to go over to our last poll of the day. What have you been doing to address those digital skills gaps? We've already talked a lot about this because all of this intertwines so much. You guys have already shared so many strategies for this, but please give me some concrete ideas for how you are addressing gaps in this area. This has been awesome, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm like, whew, good conversation. You guys are so energetic. So yeah, if you guys want to throw out a couple more ideas about digital skills into the Mentimeter or in the chat box, would love to hear from you on this last question. How are you teaching digital skills? How are you addressing those gaps? Give us strategies, give us resources that we can all use. Thanks, Edmund. Basic orientation on the first 2 days of class. Yeah, I think that's been something we've all started doing, right? We have to be getting them onboarded to these tools. Good one. Yay, the digital literacy framework instructor implementation guide. I meant to launch into a, complete digital skills package here, but I don't have the time. That's a big one. You guys go check that out. It's the Maryland Digital Literacy Framework Instructor Implementation Guide. It gives concrete lesson activities that you can use in your classroom. It'll show you what level it's appropriate for. It'll show you the process and the materials that you need and extension activities and all of that. So go check that out for sure. YouTube videos, GCF Learn Free, great one. Woohoo, love it. Yeah, GCF Global, you've got so many tutorials and lessons on different digital skills. We have, great, Peg says to model and facilitate learning opportunities. Yeah, breakout room, basic orientation, great. North Star, of course, good one. Thank you, Jamie, for dropping the link to the instructor implementation guide. Perfect. Uh-oh, what did I just do? Oh, I clicked on it. Oh, good, I can show you the implementation guide. That was an accident, but hey, why not? Yeah, this is the instructor implementation guide. I love that it shows you so we have curated resources or lesson activities. I like the lesson activities a lot. And if you go into one, it's gonna show you at the top. Let's look at writing. It'll show you the level at the top. So collaborative problem solving with blogs. It shows you which skills it's addressing. So this one is addressing technical, communicative, and collaborative digital skills. Objectives, standards, materials, instructions. So definitely go there, check it out. Let's see if we got more ideas here. digitalliteracy.assessment.org, good one. A learning circle. Yeah, after registration, but before the first class, helping students with these skills. Good idea, learning circles, I love it. Digital skills instructor co-teaching with literacy instructor to provide student support. Great idea, Jill. I love it. Yeah. Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. This has been a great time, a great conversation. I appreciate all of the participation. Let's continue this work together. If you, good, Anna. I'm glad you've heard about it now. You can go check it out. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I've got 2 more minutes and I can talk fast. Otherwise, feel free to email me. I'm on Twitter at Rachel Teasall. There are so many great resources that we didn't even get to get into. So I hope you found this useful as a starting point, but dive in. Let me know if you'd like to see more, and I'm always happy to continue the conversation. Good. Is there a mailing list? And I don't have a mailing list, but email me and I'll email you. Good. I'm glad you found it useful. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good. I'm glad you liked it. Woo! I'm so grateful that you guys shared your ideas. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
So for those of you, thank you, Rachel. We really appreciated this conversation. For those of you who are still here, there is a proof of participation link in the chat, as well as a feedback survey. So please fill those two out. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great Monday.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.